In today's video, I'm going to break down 3 very surprising facts about the dismissive avoidant attachment style and limerence. And if you don't know what limerence is, we are going to cover that, and we're going to talk about how this truly affects the avoidant and the important and even shocking must-knows. So first and foremost, limerence is basically this very intense emotional state of infatuation that then turns into obsession and even emotional dependency on another person. It was first described by psychologist Dorothy Tenov in 1979, specifically in her book called Love and Limerence, The Experience of Being in Love. Now, what is the difference between just being really infatuated with somebody versus actually being in limerence? Well, a couple of really crucial things. Number one, people who are in limerence have very obsessive and even intrusive thoughts. Okay. So they think about somebody like all day, every day. Whereas somebody not in limerence, they tend to have much more just secure and balanced feelings. Number two, there tend to be euphoric highs and crushing lows when it comes to limerence. In other words, you might have somebody who constantly thinks about somebody and feels the sense of euphoria from thinking about them, but then this realization that maybe this person's not going to be with them, or how somebody actually treats them or responds to them can cause these crushing lows because so much of their emotional state is dependent on their object of limerence or the person that they're obsessively infatuated with. Number three, there's a lot of idealization. In other words, there tends to be a dynamic of putting somebody on a pedestal and seeing only the good and kind of filtering out any potential flaws in this person because they're falling in love or falling into really limerence with the idea of a person rather than the person themselves. The other really big components of limerence are that there tends to be this strong fear of rejection, a lot of fantasizing about somebody constantly, and even building a deep romantic bond with somebody in the fantasy world. In other words, in your imagination more than in actual real life. And you may even have physical reactions in more extreme cases of limerence where you find yourself having your heart race if you're around them, or maybe you start sweating or get very nervous and clam up. And you may even see that somebody falls into a space where they're dreaming about this person or lose their appetite because they're just so excited thinking about this person or so nervous all the time being in that person's presence. Now, what's really interesting is that limerence tends to have a few crucial stages. The first one is this infatuation stage, this initial attraction and obsessiveness. And that's where this intense emotional fixation really begins. And then there's this idealizing of the person that tends to follow, the euphoria with putting that person on a pedestal and feeling like, oh my gosh, could there be something here, and fantasizing about it. And then you see this like physical reaction and over analysis dynamic. Okay. So this is all in the infatuation stage. But then there's the second stage, which is this emotional addiction. And this is a key cornerstone of limerence. It's what makes it different from a typical dynamic where somebody's just thinking about somebody and excited and maybe interested in them and excited to see how it plays out. There's this really strong emotional addiction component where it's almost like your self-worth seems to depend on that person's response to you or what you think they might think of you. You may even find yourself in this rich fantasy world where you're imagining them seeing you do all these things that you're good at. And it almost feels like this person is the center of your world to the point where you even self-abandon your own daily activities and being present in your own life because you are so obsessively fixated on this person. And then we have the last phase, which is the deterioration phase. Now, the deterioration either happens because there's some sort of disillusionment, the person that you're so obsessed with just doesn't seem to reciprocate your feelings, or you end up feeling like there's an actual rejection that takes place where it's very active and clear, or potentially, things happen and eventually you move on in a different direction. Now, here's how this tends to affect the dismissive avoidant. Okay. A lot of people think, oh, dismissive avoidants must not fall into limerence because they're not really ones to care too much about romantic relationships. Well, here's shocking fact number one. They do. And they do not quite as much as fearful avoidant attachment styles and anxious attachment styles, but not too far off either. Why and how does this happen? Well, this is shocking fact number two. Somebody, when they are in this place of having this state of limerence, a lot of times dismissive avoidance will fall into limerence with people who are emotionally unavailable. And what I mean by this is because dismissive avoidants have these huge fears and wounds around actually letting their guard down and they're afraid to be vulnerable or to open up, a lot of times they will have Limerence for people who are like on the other side of the world, or a famous actor or TV star, or somebody that they've put on a pedestal that they know they're actually never going to meet or be able to spend time with. Even sometimes people who are in committed relationships already. And part of why this is happening is because they get to create this fantasy world where they bond with this person in the fantasy world without having to actually confront any of their fears or concerns of being vulnerable and being seen and being known and all of these things that they're often terrified about to begin with in reality. Okay. Now, shocking fact number 3, and I do want to let you know before I tell you this last important piece. If you're somebody who's experiencing limerence and you're finding it be difficult for you, you feel like it's just not really healthy for you right now, and maybe you're obsessing over somebody to the point where like you really are abandoning yourself, it's usually telling you really interesting things about yourself, namely that you have deeply unmet needs. And that in the fantasy world, you're imagining this person meet those deeply unmet needs in your life. For example, a lot of times people fall into limerence because they imagine somebody seeing them, deeply seeing and knowing them, because they actually really struggle to see themselves, to see their own feelings, to acknowledge their emotions, to know what their needs are, to know what their boundaries are. They're often ignoring themselves in favor of people pleasing everybody else. And so they infatuate with the idea of being seen by somebody. Okay. So that's more like our anxious attachment style limerence, like version of it. But you'll often see this take place, and limerence is really powerful feedback into what's usually deeply missing in your life. Okay, so we project it onto another person, we imagine another person doing it for us, and it's our way of actually trying to get closer to our need. A dismissive avoidant version of this. Okay, fun fact number 3. Oh, but by the way, if you're struggling with it, you can dive into our limerence course fully for free just for a limited time if you win them. Now, here's our last piece. Okay. Shocking fact number 3, dismissive avoidance, if they are not falling into limerence with somebody who is emotionally unavailable, they often fall into limerence because of these specific needs that somebody promises to meet or seems to meet. Number 1, empathy. And it makes sense, right? Because dismissive avoidants really struggle to empathize with themselves and feel their own feelings. So when somebody's like really noticing their feelings and making them feel seen in that way around their emotions and empathizing with them, often goes a long way. Other major needs that they tend to fall into limerence around are if they feel deeply acknowledged or appreciated, if they're made to be seen as capable, if they are accepted, if somebody's really accepting of them in general, their fears or flaws or things like that. I mean, all of these things go a super long way in the dismissive avoidant feeling a sense of limerence. So hopefully from today's video, you have a better understanding of what limerence actually is, whether or not you might be in it or have a pattern of experiencing it, and then also understand how the dismissive avoidant tends to fall into limerence and those surprising facts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for stopping by. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our future content. And I can't wait to see you next time.